It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders, and it is a Friday before a game, which means back in the building. Steelers DB Derrick Bell joining the pod. How we doing?
Doing well, man. I wanted to ask you guys just right off the bat, when was the last time that you could convincingly say that the Steelers were the NFL's game of the week? Like if you look around the NFL schedule this week, and I think you can make a really strong assumption that this on paper looks like the best matchup. And no one would have predicted it before the season started because of how Washington was viewed before the season, just based on some of the coaching hires that they made and all this stuff. A lot of changes over there. It's but this matchup looks fantastic. I am so excited to watch this game.
Yeah. Number 3 scoring offense versus number 2 scoring defense. I know that's what I was telling people is I don't know that's getting the national hype that I feel like it should be. But at the same time, you said game of the week
anywhere. Like the team, it's only like a third of the country is going to see the game.
Mm-hmm.
The on-paper game of the week, maybe. The actual game of the week probably just happened last night, though, already. So
yeah, that is true. Maybe I should have prefaced that by saying weekend slate. Last night's game was obviously incredible too. I think a lot of people would probably look at that Texans game for this weekend, but to me, man, you watch Houston play, especially in recent weeks, it's that's just such an uninspiring offense just because of how bad the offensive line is, and it's kind of corroded everything else that's going on over there. But this, to me, I don't think anyone thought that the Steelers were going to be 6-2 at this point in the season, but I know that no one, even the good people in Washington, did not expect the Commanders to be 7-2.
Yeah, probably 8-1 or 9-0. Yeah, you're right. 7-2 is probably underachieving a little bit. No, but seriously, you just mentioned the injuries that have taken place there with those teams as to why, maybe it's a different opinion of a matchup as opposed to where we sit right now. And that's where I want to start is with the injuries on these two sides. Alan, Nick Herbig, who started off the week with limited participation, I think some people were hoping that would trend in the right direction. The Steelers would get him back this upcoming week. Not going to be the case. DNP the last day of the week and now rolled out as we sit here. Obviously, the addition of Preston Smith eases that a little bit behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. But what do we know? Was there a setback? Is this still just the same thing? They're being cautious with it. Do we not know? Where are we at with this?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I talked to Nick Herbig briefly after the practice today, and he seemed to think that it was still kind of up in the air at that point as to whether he was going to be able to play. So I don't really know what happened here, but I don't think it's some kind of major setback. I thought all along it was sort of maybe 40-60 that he was probably not going to play this week, but had a chance. I think he will play next week. And I think part of it is that when you add Preston Smith to the mix, he's not going to play any special teams. So the other guy that you dress at outside linebacker is going to have to play a lot of special teams. I think if it was going to be Moon and Herbig, and they could have given Herbig kind of a small role, he might have been able to play. But with it being Smith and one other guy, then I think that other guy is going to have to play full board on special teams. The last thing you want to do coming back from a hamstring injury is go cover punts that's the hardest of all those jobs. So I think it makes sense just to hold him out one more week here, let Moon dress, play all the special teams, and then figure it out going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derrick, I don't know if you have too much to add on. I guess the question that I have for you to kind of parlay off that, because you weren't on here, obviously, when we talked about those additions, and I know that you talked about them on your personal channel, but what do you make of the addition of Preston Smith as a player? What are they getting in him that wasn't maybe already on the bench for them in the form of Nick Herbig? Obviously, a very different body type.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just the body type, the archetype of player that we're talking about. Preston Smith's kind of unique because he is a 3-4 linebacker kind of by trade, but he doesn't look like most of the Steelers' traditional 3-4 linebackers. Just because of, he's 6'5", 270. To me, he looks even a little bit heavier than that. He's 275. So this is almost
looks that way.
Yeah. He's almost he's bigger than Dupree. to me. At least that's how he looks on film. And he also just rushes a little bit differently. You know, the Steelers have a bunch of speed guys on the outside, but Smith's not that he's necessarily like super slow off the ball. He is 32 years old now, but he's just more of a crafty rusher, super good with his hands. Like he can mix in a little bit of power. It really reminds me a lot of like the Golden edition 2 seasons ago. And I thought that Golden had some really strong moments when he did get the opportunity to play. I think in theory, this move makes a ton of sense. Like even if he's only on the team for the next eight games or whatever, because the cap hit's just not manageable for not just the Steelers, but really anyone next season. That's why the Packers wanted to move on partially. But I think, this makes a ton of sense just to, kind of give yourself some insurance. I think the big thing that I would want to see moving forward is they got to get TJ Watt's snap count under control, man. Like I know the dude's making $1 billion and he's your best player, and it's hard to take him off the field. But sometimes you got to save guys from themselves. Like 92% of snaps in your age 30 season, it's just not smart. It's just putting him in a lot of situations where he's just going to get a lot of wear and tear. So I would like to get that snap count down, give Preston Smith a little bit of run to help keep some of the starters fresh.
Yeah, Preston Smith listed at 265. At the combine 10 years ago, weighed 271. Now, I know you guys have not gone through this, but let me just explain that the 25 to 35 weight is very different for everyone. There ain't nobody out there that weighs the same for those 10 years. All right, so if he was 271 at the combine, he's at least 280 right now. Like there's no doubt. Okay.
We need to get Alfredo Roberts to maybe reveal some more information.
I'll say I bet Alfredo would tell us.
Yeah.
I was super happy about that. Not to get off on a tangent, but I was super happy that Alfredo did spill the beans, because I've been saying, I know I've said it on here, but I've said it in multiple different forums. I'm like, y'all know that Darnell is not 270. Like there's just no way that this dude is even close to 270, man. And it's great. Like it's awesome, which I actually want to talk about Darnell later on for the preview. So I'll save some of that, but.
Well, I got a good Darnell story though. So we're talking in the locker room today just about I guess there was like a play in practice or something where like Joey Porter Jr. ended up against him, and like it's like everyone thinks Joey Porter Jr. is this huge corner and then like still looks small next to Darnell Washington. I was like, how do you tackle that guy as a corner? So I went over and asked Beanie Bishop. I was like, did you ever like have to full speed tackle Darnell Washington? He's like, no. And I was like, could you? He goes, I don't know. You just by any means necessary, like just grab a piece and hold on, like whatever you got to do. He's like, if you think you have a plan, just throw it out the window. You just got to throw yourself in there and try to hold on. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess on the positive side of things for Steelers injury wise, we knew we were going to be getting a group of players back for this one. Zach Frazier, Cordarrelle Patterson, Justin Fields, all good to go. Also, like Michael Pruitt was never in question, but he was also, listed as a full participant, will play. He's been dealing with that knee thing, obviously, for a couple of weeks. But obviously the big news there is getting Zach Frazier back in the mix at center. Again, cap tip, all credits to Ryan McCollum and the way that he filled in, but he's not the level of player that Zach Frazier is. And with how well Zach was playing up until that injury, I'm very excited to get him back in the mix.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's Frazier, one of the best rookies in the entire NFL this season. I think that this is a game where I think it's going to help to have Frazier back for obvious reasons. One of the biggest reasons is because I think the Steelers are going to need to run the football this week, and I think they can, especially with him in the lineup, and I'm excited to see what it looks like. And also, like you mentioned, McCollum filled in about as admirably as I think anyone could have expected, but there were obviously some really rough moments in pass protection. It's kind of important coming up because Johnny Newton for the Commanders, their like second round pick, is kind of being inserted into the lineup due to some injuries. And like he's gotten more and more playing time the past 2 weeks. It's the best that he's played as a pro. He had 7 pressures and multiple sacks, I think, the week before. So yeah, it's going to be a kind of fun matchup of a couple youngsters.
Very high motor on Johnny Newton. Can
excellent hands too.
Can get out of his gap against the run. I think. I think the Steelers can whip on him that way. But he's explosive in the pass rush for sure. Zach Frazier, I think this injury maybe cost him a shot at a Pro Bowl. To be honest, I think he's been playing that good. Mm-hmm. Like he's been not just really good for a second round rookie, but one of the better centers in the AFC.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Switching to the Washington side, just on the injury things here before we move on. Brian Robinson, the running back, Brian Robinson Jr. rolled out along with Lattimore, not going to make his Commanders debut in this one either, and Cornelius Lucas, their starting left tackle, all rolled out. And then their starting right tackle, Andrew Wiley, is questionable, as well as their kicker, Austin Siebert. So what do we make of those, and how big of a deal are some of those absences?
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me those absences, I don't know, like a month ago before I really started watching Commanders film, I would have said that Washington was in a good amount of trouble. But I actually like that, like some of these other guys have been playing pretty well. The Commanders just over the past like month have somehow, by some black magic, have been able to be like a top 5-ish unit in terms of like success rate against the like in pure dropback situations. Didn't see that coming. I don't think they're very talented on the back end. They definitely need Lattimore to run Dan Quinn's like preferred style of defense with a lot of man-to-man, a lot more single high than he wants to play. Austin Eckler, I thought that he was completely washed. It was one of the many things that I was wrong about with this Commanders team, but he's averaging like 5.6, I think, yards per carry this season. So you're going to see a lot of him, a lot of Jeremy McNichols, who I think had a cup of coffee in Pittsburgh,
Yep.
Right? He's had some decent moments. And then their left tackle situation, Brandon Coleman was a guy that I was higher on than the consensus. Shout out to Brandon Thorne because he brought him up in a Substack post of his in like March and was talking about him. And I went back and watched the film from him, I think in early April, really liked his tools, thought that he would potentially be a guy that was going to be, kind of have a redshirt season. He went earlier than I think a lot of people anticipated. They've been like rotating him in a little bit. And he's actually played pretty well. Like I actually really like what I've seen from him. So I don't necessarily think these are too terrible. Obviously Lattimore would have been a big needle mover, and I actually think Brian Robinson's ran fantastic this year, but they've made it work so far without these guys. So it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think they have like some decent depth on their offensive line. Like Trent Scott is another former Steeler, a sort of traditional pro, and Sam Cosme's played tackle before if they have to move him outside.
He's a beast too. He's a beast.
I know. So like I don't think this offensive line is going to panic about missing one guy. If anybody misses 2 tackles, that's probably not good. But yeah, I think this is an interesting offense because it's all just it's just like a really, really well schemed to their talent unit. Like this is not a great team on paper, and they're playing really well. And it's not a great scheme on paper either. Like this is not like, oh my gosh, look at this groundbreaking NFL offense. It's like kind of gimmicky and a bunch of like basic stuff with some tempo and Jaden Daniels running around but it works. And I think it's a good marriage of the scheme and the personnel they have, because like, I don't know. I'm not like, yeah, Brian Robinson's a big part of what they've done, but I don't look at what they've done and say like, oh, it needed to have Brian Robinson in there. Like Austin Eckler would do fine. And I think the same thing about the offensive line. The same thing at wide receiver. Like Terry McLaurin has always been really good, but like the rest of these guys are just kind of there and they're making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up Coleman. That's who obviously we'll see a lot of Alex Highsmith on Sunday. We can dive into that matchup, obviously, as we kind of go through here. And that's kind of where I want to start now. We've gone through the injuries. We kind of always on Fridays of game weeks kind of preview the matchups, talk about the matchups that we're looking forward to the most, and obviously get into some predictions. Did I just kind of set the table? Is that a matchup that you're looking for now, knowing that a rookie tackle on that left side making, what is it, his second career start, or did he just come in because of injury last week? Because he actually started a game, Coleman?
They've like kind of done the really untraditional thing. Like he's rotated in, like he's played snaps in most of the games this season. And I think it's just like they took him. I think he was like a top 75 pick, and like Coleman was kind of one of those shoot for the stars type of players that I think he could be a starting left tackle outside the first round. But he's played a little bit. I mean, Highsmith, obviously, he's been playing incredibly well. I actually think that
for the last 5 games.
Yeah. I think that there's There's a lot to really dive into with this matchup. I think the big thing for me would be, the Steelers coming off a game in which they didn't defend the run extremely well against the Giants. You look at just some of the numbers and some of the explosive runs that they were able to generate. That's been a big thing with this Commanders team. They can generate explosives. I mean, they're first in success rate too, but they can do a lot of really cool things. I think with Cliff, I think I was extremely wrong just on him in general, but bringing in Anthony Lynn was huge for them. Anthony Lynn's been a guy around the league for a long time. He has a reputation as as kind of a run game guru type of guy, and they brought him in, and the marriage between those two guys has been really cool because you get a lot of the stuff that Cliff, previously has done, but he shifted away from some of the old formational stuff, some of the split stuff. They're not doing as much open edges. They're doing a little bit heavier personnel, but the run game looks fantastic. I mean, it's the most gap heavy run game in the NFL, like them in Arizona. And they do a bunch of creative stuff that you pretty much they put a lot of stuff on film. Not everything works. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it feels like it's just a grab bag of concepts. And it's do we really need to run 18 different types of counter and trap and pin and pull? But they make you prepare for a lot of different stuff out of different formations. And I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to me. I think that's the thing that I'm looking forward to most. I think the passing game, you kind of know what you're going to get and expect. It's going to run through Terry McLaurin and then Jaden as a scrambler. But the run game for me is probably the thing that I'm most excited to watch on both sides, just to see how both teams kind of adjust.
This is a really good coaching staff. I didn't really,
and it's one they didn't want. They didn't even want Dan Quinn or Cliff Kingsbury.
And Brian Johnson is there too. And Anthony, Brian Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury, and Anthony Lynn is a strange marriage, but it's really working. That's three guys with wildly different sort of paths to success at their previous stops, but it's working, and they got a bunch of been there, done that, veteran position coaches too, Bobby Ingram and a bunch of former Steelers, Darnell Stapleton, Jason Simmons, and Willie Gay, all there. But Ryan Kerrigan's a coach for him, Ken Norton's a coach for. I don't know. I really like this coaching staff. I think this looks like a really well coached team.
Hey, real quick, Smitty, because I know I don't want to cut you off or anything, but this is another stat that I pulled earlier in the week. I think it's really fascinating. So Jaden Daniels has been the league's best scrambler this season, in NFL high 327 rushing yards and 17 first downs. Those are both tops in the NFL on quarterback scrambles. Pittsburgh's defense all season long has only allowed 15 yards and 1 first down. So now they haven't played the most mobile guys. They played a lot of statues, but at the same time, it's really interesting to me because I think that if you're going to spend money on Patrick Queen, this is the game. This is the game that you go and sign Patrick Queen in free agency for, because I'll be honest, I think that Jaden, from a straight line perspective, I think he's even a little bit faster than he was last year at LSU. And he was pretty freaking fast to begin with. I think he might be straight line speed-wise the fastest quarterback in the league. But I think this is a good time to have a guy like Patrick Queen and even Peyton Wilson to a degree in the middle of your defense, and guys like Minka Fitzpatrick who can really cover a lot of ground, real rangy guys. I'm excited to see what that looks like. You mentioned the pass rush with Highsmith. They are going to have individual matchups that they're going to have, I think, the talent over. Like I said, Sam Cosmi is the one guy on the offensive line that I think is a really, really good player. I think the unit as a whole is probably better than the sum of their parts, I guess. But it's just really important to maintain gap and rush lane integrity against Jaden, because he's this really skinny dude and he can get through some really tight crevices to escape out the pocket. And one of the things I like about Jaden, how he's playing right now, is he's going 1-2 and then I'm running. He's not almost hesitating. I think when you watch a lot of young quarterbacks, even guys with that type of athleticism, it's almost like they either take off too quick or they're too hesitant. And Jaden feels like he's really treading the line right now of right when he needs to go, he's going. So this is a great, the Steelers have the personnel. If anyone's going to slow Jaden down, nobody's figured it out yet, but the Steelers have the personnel in the middle of their defense to make it tough.
I think they got to play zone. I mean, most mobile quarterbacks you do, but I think it'll be up to guys like Peyton Wilson, Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott to split that role of being a good zone defender, but then also coming off and going to get the quarterback when he decides to take off. I don't think it's a game where you want to blitz him in early downs. If they can get him in 3rd and long, you can blitz him. But early downs, it's hard to blitz because they run so much like you said, counter and pin pull where like if you get caught in the wrong blitz, you're going to get gashed. And so I think you kind of have to, on early downs, if it's a pass, I think you kind of have to rush for and sort of, and honestly, like not even rush that hard. Like you're rushing to keep him in the pocket, right? Like you're not rushing for pressure. You're rushing to keep him in there and try to let your secondary make a play. It's a really tough matchup, I think.
I think a lot's been made, at least to me, that I've seen from Steelers fans with Jaden Daniels throwing to his first read more than anybody else in the NFL. Do we view that as a negative thing that the Steelers can kind of dial in on if they can take that first read away? Or does that speak more to how impressive it is the season that he's having because of how good he is, pre-snap, the line of scrimmage, identifying what the defense is doing and just knowing this is where I can get the ball to?
To me, that goes back to the coaching staff that we talked about. I mean, when the quarterback knows where he's going, I mean, that's good coaching. That's good quarterback play. But when that guy, the first or second read is open a lot, that's what you want. And I think that it does make it a little bit difficult just because everything feels like it's in sync right now for them on offense. And it's going to be tough to get them out of that rhythm. There are some different things that I think that they could potentially do. But, I mean, no, like I said, nothing's really worked. I thought the Giants played them fairly well several weeks ago. I mean, they put up a ton of points with Marcus Mariota in relief a couple weeks ago. I mean, I would just say that I wouldn't take that as like a good thing necessarily for the Steelers because I don't think it's like predictable in terms of like some of the things they like to do. Another thing that I think the Steelers do well that could potentially like help them get them into some like third and longs. The Commanders like a really, really heavy screen team. What's the ways to be good against screens? Like the Steelers have a good amount of team speed on the spine of the defense, and they're also a really good tackling team. You look like the missed tackle numbers, the Steelers are pretty favorably there. So they have some answers. It's not like, I mean, this is a really good Steelers defense. And we already talked about like they're going to have some like just talent matchups that are in their favor up front in terms of rushing the passer. It's just, having a quarterback that's playing at this type of level, it's really tough.
If you want to take away his first read, I don't think you can do that all the time. But if you can make his first read not be Terry McLaurin, then I think that's a win, even if he's completing the passes. Like, I mean, with respect to like Luke McCaffrey and Noah Brown, like, so what if they're catching the ball? Like, it's the big Joey Porter Jr. game for me, for the Steelers, because if they can present a defense that looks scary enough to make Terry McLaurin not the first read frequently, then I think that really brings down the potential of the Washington passing offense a pretty significant amount. Even if they're completing things like Ertz or out of the backfield, like I think that's a good way to approach this from the Steelers defense perspective. One more thing I want to talk about for the Steelers defense that they need to be aware of, and I'm sure they are, but like when you're talking about this game, Washington's going to go for it on fourth down. And they're really good at it. And so this is a 4-down job for the Steelers defense. I think they're 11 of 11 on fourth down. And so it is not good enough to stop them on third down. They've been really aggressive, and they've been really successful with being aggressive as well. They do a lot of that, like it's 3rd and 4. They'll run it, then go no huddle, get you back up there and make you defend fast. And they do a really good job of it.
Noah Brown, by the way, cue Katy Perry, the one that got away. For the Pittsburgh Steelers. Also, I want to ask you before we get into some more about Cliff Kingsbury, just because another thing that a lot of people have made a big deal about, and I mean, this is just a historical tendency. You look at Cliff Kingsbury's offenses, first half or second half. What are you noticing that's maybe different? Like why that wouldn't continue to be the case? Is that also just like, is that some misconception about his offenses? Is it something that you feel like has been true? Why would this offense be different?
I think that it has to be true to an extent because we watched so many of those Cardinals teams just fall off the face of the cliff, like fall off a cliff, really, the second half of the season.
Even going back to college, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence. I will say with this to me, like when I watch it on film, it feels like the Commanders have like a legitimate identity on offense. And I think that their identity is to really get after teams in the ground game. I think they have answers in terms of like the quarterbacks playing at an extremely high level. They've got the secondary pieces in terms of like the role players that aren't necessarily great, but they're like decent. They all do little things very well. Like Noah Brown and Zacchaeus, those guys are really like supplementary pieces on offense. but they block really hard. Noah Brown like plays really hard. So it's like, and then you've got, the star receiver on the outside, which is McLaurin. I even think like Zach Ertz is like somehow, I have no idea. Zach Ertz to me, I thought was washed like 2 seasons ago. He looks like he's 25. I don't even understand how that happens. But to me, this feels more sustainable just because of the identity of the team, how they're running the ball. And then I think they've got the right quarterback. And at the end of the day in the NFL, like if you have the right quarterback, most of the time it works out. And I will say this too about like, I don't want to I was wrong about Cliff, and I do think that Cliff didn't maximize some of the chances that he was given in Arizona. I will also say that Kyler in general is not a super consistent player either. So the marriage between those two guys, was also probably something that was, I guess, elevated by how inconsistent both of them were.
I think Cliff Kingsbury could very easily be someone like we talked a lot about Arthur Smith that is just better suited to being an offensive coordinator than to being a head coach.
Sure.
I think I think you're seeing some of that this year. But in terms of the second half thing, I think anytime what you're doing is different, you're going to have an advantage early that is going to disappear the more people see it. It's like any creative thing, and like remember like the year that the Wildcat took over, right? Like it was like, oh my god, the Wildcat's a new thing. September, everybody's running it, and by that year's playoffs, it was already gone. Like it was already like, no, defense has figured it out, never mind. Like anytime what you're doing is different than everybody else early on, both early in the season and early in games, it's going to be a big adjustment for people. And then as the course of time progresses, it's going to get easier and easier for them to figure you out. And I think the challenge will be, and I think that's really good that he has this big staff around him with guys that have been offensive coordinators and Lynn's been a head coach, that like they have things to pivot to now, where I'm not sure in Arizona and at previous stops, like he kind of knew what to do when defenses started to figure out the first thing that he was doing. I think he now has like a bigger repertoire of stuff to turn to because those guys bring so much to the table in addition to what he has.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Before we get into predictions, we've kind of started to touch on some things from both sides here, but I want both of you, this might be a little bit new. We've talked about typically like key matchups, but I want one from each side of the ball from each of you guys. What will be the matchup that defines this game, decides the winner from Steelers offense versus the Washington defense and vice versa? Alan, we'll start with you for this.
Well, I think it is. I don't even know how to phrase this, but I think the Washington defensive line is okay. I think Johnny Newton's a young player that I like, but I don't think they're like as good as the last two defensive lines we've seen. But I think they're really good at the second level. Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, and so I think the job is and Jeremy Chin often is playing in that second level as well. And I think he's a really underrated player. I think the job for the Steelers offensive line is different this week. And it's not so much getting worried about getting blown up and Dexter Lawrence like pushing you 3 yards back. It's, can you get to the second level? Can they get big running plays against this defense? Or is it going to be 3-4 yards every time because those second level guys are just sucking everything up? Like, I think they can move the defensive line, but I think it's going to be a real challenge from the offensive linemen and from the tight ends because that's generally who's doing a lot of that blocking as well. They've got to find a way to get hats on those guys in the second level to create some explosive in the running game, and I think that's the biggest challenge I see for the Steelers offense in this game.
Sticking with that theme of kind of the offense versus the Commanders defense, I think personally for me it starts with just how I think the Steelers like to attack kind of matches up kind of well with the way Dan Quinn wants to play defense. They want to play nickel to 12 personnel, and we'll see what the rotation looks like. I mean, Sanders still's been playing a little bit on the outside. They've been rotating some other guys on the inside. Noah, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, the former first rounder for the Dolphins. He's been playing a little bit. Yeah, Mahogany. But the big thing for me is like I think that the Steelers, we know they're one of the heaviest 12, 13 personnel teams. I'm just curious on how Washington adjusts. Are they going to stay in nickel? Are they going to stay in nickel when the Steelers are in 13? I don't think so. But you just look at some of the numbers in terms of like how both of these teams have played in that specific personnel package. The Steelers have been extremely good out of 11 personnel. They have a 48.5% success rate running the ball out of 12 personnel. That is 5th best in the NFL. You look at the Commanders on defense, defending the run out of 12 personnel. They are also at 48.6% success rate. That is 5th worst in the NFL. So I just think, for me, like the key player, if you're asking me for the Steelers offense, I know a lot of people are expecting like the moon balls and like how George Pickens has played with Russ and a lot of the fireworks that we've gotten on offense. To me, the key factor here is like Darnell Washington, because the whole idea behind drafting him is that if these teams want to do what some of the NFL defenses are doing nowadays, which is like we're going to play nickel to your 12 personnel, and that's going to be our base defense. Well, if they're going to bring a 5'10", 190-pound defensive back on the field, and the Steelers are going to roll out a 6'7", 300-pound tight end, you better be able to run the ball. Like that's the entire, like that's what this offense is built around. So it's like, you better be able to do it this week. And I think they can, just because, like I said, the pass defense has been better for them over the past month, but they're still like 28th in rushing success rate on defense for the season. Like this is a team that you can run the ball against. And I think that matches up perfectly with what the Steelers want to do. So yeah, maybe another 100. Well, I won't spoil that. Go ahead.
Okay, what about on the reverse side? And Derek, I'll start with you for that. What's the key matchup for the Steelers defense against Washington offense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna go back to I think the key matchup is like Patrick Queen in this one, just straight up. I think that this to me is like a game where you'd go out and acquire this type of player. When they signed Patrick Queen, I know a lot of people, including myself, was talking about, they're going to, see Lamar Jackson twice a year. They've had success against Lamar, but it always helps to have a linebacker that can run like 4-4. I think Queen's been really solid in the end zone coverage over the middle of the field, which should help them as well. But I just think the range with the screen game, some of the run game stuff that they like to get out on the perimeter on some of these pin and pull runs, like this is the game for me that I think Patrick Queen needs to have a huge game, maybe his best as a Steeler. So he would be the person that I would be looking forward to seeing most kind of on that side of the ball.
I already kind of mentioned Joey Porter. So I'll give you another one. I think this is a big Peyton Wilson game for the Steelers, because I think, generally you would think a team that runs the ball as much as Washington does, that you would want to play more Landon Roberts, but especially without Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler is such a receiving threat that I think they're going to want to have Peyton Wilson in there if they motion him out of the backfield, to cover him on a wheel route, that kind of thing, and also to have his speed in there so that you can have you're not sticking Patrick Queen in a predictable spot. You can allow either linebacker to absorb the quarterback responsibility if you go Peyton Wilson instead of Landon Roberts. And so I think this is a game where you might see Peyton Wilson play 80% of the snaps. I think it's going to be one where he's going to have the most sort of responsibility put on his shoulders to this point in his career. And I think it's a challenging matchup for him.
Okay. Alan, we're coming right back to you. Prediction, one bold prediction.
My prediction in general is that I think Washington will be able to move the ball against the Steelers defense. I think the Steelers will be able to run the ball against Washington, certainly. And I think they will have success in the red zone. One of the worst red zone defenses in the NFL is Washington, even though we didn't see it last time out with Russell Wilson. So I think it'll be a higher scoring game. I think the Steelers are going to win. I will say the Steelers win 30-27. And my bold prediction will be that Jaden Daniels, 3 turnovers.
Ooh, okay. I like it.
How many does he have this year?
3 total. That would match the total.
That's certainly bold. Then, Derek, what is your take?
Yeah, that is bold. That's a good shout about the red zone stuff, because the Steelers have not been good in the red zone in recent weeks. And then the Commanders, like if there is a weakness to this offense, and the reason why they haven't put up even more points is because they are also 26th in red zone percentage of touchdowns scored. The Steelers defense has been phenomenal in the red zone. I think that there's are reasons for that. But I think that that'll be like probably the deciding point in this game, to be honest with you, because I do agree with Alan. I think they will be able to move the ball in the Steelers defense. I just think that they're humming too much. The difference for me is that I think that this is going to be a higher scoring affair. I would probably lean towards like saying it's really tough because I think that this matchup could go either way. I'm going to say 27-24 Commanders. I don't feel great about it. I just think them being at home is a factor. And also, like, it just some of the stuff that they're doing on offense kind of worries me, especially with the run game stuff. I think that, if you're going to get after the Steelers defense, one of the ways to do it, I think, is with gap runs and some of the heavier personnel like Buffalo did to them last year in the playoffs. A lot of gap stuff with pullers. And I just think that that's not really necessarily the strength of the Steelers defensive lineman outside of Cam Hayward. So I'm going to take the Commanders in this one. I will say, like, my bold prediction, though, is I do think the Steelers are going to move the ball as well, and they're going to score points. I think that Najee Harris has his 4th straight 100-yard game and a season high in rushing yards.
You kind of teased it already.
Yeah, I was going to let it go earlier, but yeah, I think that they're going to be able to run the ball.
But keep that in mind, by the way, everybody. In the comments, it's always showing Derek Love on Fridays when he's in here. He's going to be the only one that's picking the Commanders to win this football game because I got the Steelers 28-24 in this one. My bold prediction, offensively, Steelers running backs total 3 touchdowns in this one. They collect 3 touchdowns of the 4 that the Steelers are going to score in this one. And defensively, Patrick Queen, interception.
Love that.
All right. Let us know your bold predictions in the comments. Let us know how you feel about the game. And we also want some hate this week for DB as opposed to the love that he's always done.
Facts.
We love what DB's DB. Oh, wait. I got to ask you this. Derek, are you familiar with Ron Mexico?
Did you see yesterday's episode?
I saw this on your all's feed. No, I'm not.
What? Can you Google it? Google it real quick. I want your reaction to what pops up. It's not bad.
I'm gonna say, am I gonna get in trouble? Like, if somebody
you're not gonna get any. Yeah, you're not gonna get any. Malware or anything. Okay. Nothing's gonna happen to your computer.
The first article is from the Atlantic. It says, "Who the heck is Ron Mexico?" Ron Mexico is Michael Vick. Michael Vick is Ron Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
The Urban Dictionary one is probably the best one.
Okay, I'm reading this one now.
Yeah, you see what happened there with why there was an alias.
Oh, good deal. Former Steelers legend.
Yes. This is funny. With the Steelers. This is when he was still in Atlanta.
Literally, my reaction, like it was Big Ben. The gif of him going, oh
yeah,
like that was my reaction when I Googled it yesterday live on here. Anyways, all right, that was random, but I had to get your reaction to it as well. DB, tell the people they can find you.
At Steelers_DB on Twitter and on YouTube, and then all my written work can be found at SteelersNow.com.
Maybe we can get an article about Ron Mexico and the legacy that he left behind in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that might be an off-season project that Alan would have to approve.
All right, I'm in on it.
Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so we all can get paid. And like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications on the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive, and something new coming maybe as soon as next week. Tease.
All right, there it is. I already told you guys to hit us in the comments, but once again, be sure to do so with your predictions for the game. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You will find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive, same place you can find us on TikTok. Then you find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, Derrick Bell, and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.